It's Rob Davin from Conspiracy HQ, and tonight we are talking with Mr. Gates from Haterazzi.com about his work, Jupiter, Volume 1 and 2, The Real Secret Ancient History of the Illuminati. If you want to know more about the Illuminati, this is the only audiobook I recommend for the Illuminati. It's probably one of the best researched works on the Illuminati as far as the actual history goes, not the myth that most of the alternative media likes to, toss around. This is the actual hardcore facts, and there's some real shocking information in there that just totally is gasping for air when you hear how shocking some of this information is. And we're going to get into some of that here coming up in the show. We talked a lot about secret societies, and we got into a lot of the history of dominance and superiority by various races, how it all leads back into this Illuminati. And we also even get into the entertainment industry and how they're still pulling the strings down in Hollywood. For those of you that don't know Mr. Gates is actually an entertainer. He's a comedian. He's rubbed shoulders with a lot of the big stars. He's, as you'll see during the presentation, there's pictures of him there with all kinds of famous people. And he reveals some real shocking information. So hang on. And don't forget to check out his audiobooks, Jupiter Volume 1 and 2. You can get them both at the Conspiracy Outlet, conspiracyoutlet.com. And, so hang on. Let's get into the interview.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this first installation in a series about the Illuminati.
Where to start? When I first moved to the north in 1998, I was greeted by a blast of -40 winter in early December. And, Mr. Gates, it's been a long time since we've talked. I guess.
Absolutely. I like the new layout. I like this whole live thing. It's cool.
Yeah, it's a lot different than what we used to do. So, the last time we had you on, we were talking about Jupiter, your audio series that you've done. I guess you call it an audio book. Yeah. I think that's where we're going to get started because I'm pretty sure that a lot of people don't really aren't familiar with your work. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about Jupiter?
Okay, well, first of all, for the record, I think it's important that everybody know that I'm a comedian first. So if they were to come to my regular show, that's what they would get. It would be pop culture comedy. And, we do talk about social issues and whatnot. But the Jupiter thing, that's been something that's been a passion of mine, just the investigation of the Illuminati and world control. I've been into that since the mid-1980s, and Jupiter is just an accumulation of what I found. It's just theories. It doesn't necessarily, I don't claim to have all the answers. I'm on a journey learning just like the rest of you, so that's what Jupiter is.
Yeah, and it's a really good presentation the way you laid it out. You kind of went back through and, actually took documented fact instead of the usual rumor that goes along with research in the Illuminati. Okay, let's go all the way back. Where does the Illuminati, where did these secret societies actually begin?
Well, secret societies go back to ancient Babylon, ancient Egypt, ancient Greece. There was always secret societies, and what they were societies of learned men. These were the people who had knowledge, while most of the people, and it was really a system of control. Most of the people who worked your fields and kept your economy going, there was no need for them to know the secrets, of science or the secrets of, the world geography and stuff like that. So these secret societies were just holders of the truth, basically. And they have evolved into what we call secret societies today.
Now, when we're talking like all the way back, or we're talking Babylon, Samaria, those places, those ancient cultures, the first cultures we know about in recorded history, anyhow. What was this a secret organization back then?
What was it called?
Yeah, like what was the main one?
Well, the main one, the root one, would probably be the Kemetic mystery schools of ancient Egypt, and this is where Greeks, all of your Greek philosophers, this is where they were schooled. And these courses were 40 years. You had to take these courses for 40 years because at that time, there was no separation of science and magic. So once you graduated, 40 years later, you would be known as a scholar priest. So not only would you be learned in mathematics and sciences, you would also be learned in magic and occult science. And so that's where it gets its root in the Kemetic mystery schools of Egypt. Then it changes to Alexandria once the Greeks take over Egypt. It becomes it's no longer the Kemetic mystery schools, but I'm drawing a complete blank. Library of Alexandria. That's where all that knowledge was held. And of course, we all know that was destroyed. And we don't know what was lost there.
Well, yeah, and there is quite a rumor that it wasn't destroyed as well, from my remembering.
Yeah. Well, most of that knowledge did get out of there, like all the pertinent knowledge. But it was definitely destroyed due to the Christianity coming in, which was another system of control, which was going to come take over, all of that. So, a lot of that knowledge more than likely made it out of there and into other hands.
Okay. So we move down through and we get the Christianity popping up. Now, it's my understanding that Christianity was almost like a secret society when it began.
Oh, absolutely, it was. Yeah, it was a small sect, and these people were very strange. Because today, of course, we know that Christianity is the biggest religion on the planet, but at that time, it was like a cult, and these were weird. They talked about drinking blood and eternal life, and this was an alien concept to the Greeks and the Romans, who were polytheists, who had a multitude of gods. And here came these people saying that there was one God. And, so it was, they at one time they were pretty much just like a secret society.
Okay. And I guess now down through the ages, we move on to like the Masons and the Rosicrucians and whatnot. Where does, the Knights of Templar maybe would be the next good spot to touch?
Yeah. They, well, first of all, we got to understand, just using general history, the Moors who were Islamic people had come up from Africa and pretty much took over most of Europe, all of Italy, France, and of course Israel. And the Christians were pushed up north. But the Muslims did allow the Christians to stay in the lands they conquered too and practice their religion. And it wasn't until the Reconquista, where the Christians unified and came down to kick the Moors out of Europe, which took hundreds of years, that the power switched hands. All of this ancient knowledge had come from the Kemetic mystery schools, went to Alexandria, and ended up in the hands of Muslim people. And during the Dark Ages, for what is known historically as the Dark Ages, this was the golden age for Islam because they were the ones who had all this knowledge. They had all of the histories that had been written in ancient Egypt and all the civilizations before. And so once the Christians were able to take over, they got that knowledge. Just for an example of what kind of knowledge I'm talking about, was the existence of America, the North American continent. They always knew it was there. And you'll notice that it was the year 1492 during the Reconquista where Isabella and Ferdinand kicked the Moors out, the Muslims, the Jews, kicked them all out of Europe. They said, you either convert to Catholicism or you leave these lands. And of course, most of the Muslims and the Jews left and went back down into Africa. Now, Isabella Ferdinand and the Christians knew that the Muslims had already known that America was there. And they were like, okay, if we're kicking them out of here, they're going to have to go settle somewhere. So let's hurry up and go conquer that new world over there. They already knew it was there. Columbus knew where he was going. He was sent on a mission. And not just Columbus, a few explorers were sent there to hurry up and go and Christianize that land before the Muslims did. Mm-hmm. And that's just general history. And, the dates add up. It just so happens the day that they kick all the Jews and Muslims out of Europe is the day that Columbus embarked on his discovery of America.
Go figure. Lots of little strange coincidences like that in history.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we move down through and now we see like the Vatican become a real power throughout Europe and most of the world. How do they tie into any of these secret societies?
Well, once one thing that was cool to Rome, the Roman power base about Christianity was that it was so simple. And one thing that set Christians apart from pagans was that they were willing to die for what they believed in. And they were happy to die. You could send them to the lions all day and they were happy because their religion preached that you will die and go to heaven. And this was very peculiar to the Romans, but they were like, this is a great system of control. And so it made sense to slowly make Christianity the state religion because it was much more simple. It had rules, it had hardcore rules, and there wasn't a bunch of gods that you can run to. If one god upset you, you could just go to another god and pray. There was one god, and you had to abide by his rules. And if you can control what those rules are, then it kind of helps. I mean, they didn't have surveillance cameras back then to watch people. So what better design than to say, hey, there's this omnipresent person who's going to be watching you. And if you go against these rules that we happen to edit, then you're going to have to deal with him in the afterlife. So the Christianity becomes a state religion, throughout most of Europe. Of course, Islam is a problem for them because they keep coming up from the south and they just keep conquering lands and whatnot. So these back and forth wars keep going. But after the Reconquista, of course, the Christians win that part of the world once and for all. And in fact, not once and for all because they're still over there fighting now. But the Vatican becomes the power base once Rome is unified. The Vatican becomes the power base. And the way it really became the power base was on top of all the Islamic wars and all this stuff, from the north, you had these Nordic people coming down. They refer to them in history as barbarians. But these people were just started showing up out of the north. And a lot of them were running from the Huns, who were also coming from the north. And they were looking for a place to settle. So you have the Muslims coming up from the south. You have these strange large, blonde, blue-eyed white people coming from the north. The Romans didn't know what to do. So they try to fight them off as much as they could. Eventually, they found it more reasonable to just train them, and say, hey, listen, you guys can settle this land right here, but we just need you to protect it from the Moors and the Muslims and just protect it. And so they kept, and this is really what led to the fall of Rome was they just kept given this land to these different barbarian tribes. And then the barbarian tribes who had been trained by the Romans in warfare and whatnot, a lot of times they would get the land and be like, what are we going to serve you for? Forget you. We're taking this over, And so what ended up happening was there was a pope, and I don't have my notes here with me, but I can't remember. He was a corrupt pope. He had a lot of enemies in Rome, and he knew sooner or later he was going to be assassinated. So he went to the Franks, which was headed by a gentleman named Charlemagne, or Charles the Great. And he needed protection. He needed protection from his Roman enemies. So he goes to Charlemagne and says, hey, did you know that you guys are the original people that's referred to here in the Bible? You guys are the original Jews. And the Franks believed that. They were like, okay, cool. So he's like, yeah, so you guys have to defend the church. So Charlemagne and the Franks, they protected the church. And from that day forward, they have been known as the Jews of the Bible. It's an uncomfortable truth, but it is the truth.
Well, that's interesting, and well, I guess we can get into the current history in a little bit. But now, is there some sort of like Jewish secret society, or?
Well, first we got to understand that the Semitic, it's a religion. It's a religion which was the original Christianity. Christianity is a spinoff of that original religion. And those, so it's a religion. And like any religion, it doesn't matter when we're talking about race and whatnot. Now, today, when we think of Jewish, we think of a race of people. And these would be known as the Semitic people. And it gets very controversial when you start to go into that because if you do go back into history and you look at the Akkadians, who were the original settlers of Samaria and who were a Semitic people and made the Semitic language the language of the land, these were sub-Saharan African people. And in fact, there's some who will argue that Semite meant a mixture, semi, meaning half Greek, half black. And that's why they were called Semites. And this is why a lot of the white races didn't accept them. And again, these are controversial facts, but there's no way we can talk about Illuminati or world control without talking about white supremacy eventually.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And we'll definitely get to that, too. Okay, so let's move up here a little bit. What about the Freemasons? Because I think they come in sometime just after the Catholic Church, after 700 or 800 years after they gained control. But nobody really knows when the Freemasons, when they started. My bet is they started somewhere around the time of Francis Bacon, and he had a lot to do with it. Either they were in existence before he came to prominence or right around the same time. Definitely the Rosicrucians were started by him. But as far as Freemasons, we're not really sure. Like, history doesn't really tell, because if you just look at their, just look at a lot of their symbolism, it's all ancient Egypt, it's all Greek, it's all Roman, it's like all these ancient symbols. So it's an amalgamation of all these, ancient cultures and the knowledge and the mystery schools that came from those ancient cultures and borrowed from one another. But we don't know exactly when Freemasonry gets its start. I wonder if the Freemasons themselves know.
Your average Freemason,
probably
I don't think they know. I think the average Freemason is part of a fraternity who does great things in their community. And I don't think it's until you get into the higher degrees. And even there might be a system of initiation to higher degrees that we don't know about. I'm not a Freemason. My father was, but he never talked about it as he was not supposed to. So I don't know. All I know about Freemasonry is what we know about Freemasonry.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think that's an important fact. The alternative media should remember is that we only know bits and pieces about everything of it. We shouldn't be drawing too many conclusions there.
Yeah.
I'm not a member of the lodge by no means, but
when it comes to Freemasonry, one thing you can rest assured, we all know what a Mason is. A Mason is someone who works in stone, who builds things. And they had secrets, there were secrets to how how they made these wonderful, beautiful buildings in the ancient world. And these were secrets that were passed down from father to son. And, you were not to let anybody else know these secrets. And, there were all kinds of different Masons. You had the Moorish Masons. And this is why if you look at a lot of the buildings in Spain, in Italy, they have what's known as Moorish architecture, which kind of looks like Islamic architecture, because those were Islamic Masons who built that. But then when you go over to England and you start looking at those castles, those were different types of stonemasons with different types of secret. So when it came to the building of America, it was, and this is why when you look into history and you'll see George Washington and a lot of the founding fathers in Freemason regalia, is because when Francis Bacon designed what he called the New Atlantis, he employed or it wasn't really him who employed. I guess he suggested that the Freemasons be the ones who come here and build it, because that's what they do. They build, and the Rosicrucians, they wrote. So they were going to be the ones who would write this stuff. And I talked about this in Jupiter too, as a matter of fact, and kind of untied all the knots there.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody's wondering about any of this information we're covering now, Jupiter is by far the best breakdown on the Illuminati I have ever found, and I've read all the big books. The way you actually go through and its history, a person can go look up very easily to see how it falls together and everything. So,
well, that's what I wanted to do with Jupiter, because whenever you say the word Illuminati, like, so many different things come up, because there's so many YouTube videos, so many websites, and people start tying in, Christianity. Okay, it's the devil. All this stuff is devil worship. Then you got other people who say it's magic and it's wizards and all this stuff. And, the history is not as scary as that. It's not as complex as that. The whole magic and mysticism thing didn't start until really the Nazis. The Nazis are the ones who really believed that stuff and believed that they were wizards and supermen and their blood, because of Madame Blavatsky's studies and the things she had said. And of course, the world was going through this spiritualist movement at the time. So all of that stuff was very appealing, and that, as we've gotten to today, all of this stuff is just big stuff. It's mixed up. It's like, okay, yes, you have this secret organization with these symbols and this, all of this, these colors and all this stuff. But then you still got the dragons and the wizards and all that stuff in there. And then that kind of, it confuses things. It confuses the truth, which is not really that strange.
Well, yeah, and I think when you really start digging into the Illuminati, I mean, a lot of people claim that it's this overarching secret society, and that's really not quite the case of the true Illuminati. I mean, the Illuminati was just a group of scholars that got together in secret because they were being prosecuted. So,
absolutely, and it's no coincidence that the Illuminati as we know it started with the Bavarian Illuminati. And most of the teachings that Adolf Hitler and the Nazis put into practice came out of Bavaria, So and then, of course, after World War II, when Hitler, killed himself, or whatever, we know that Nazis were easily just worked into the American and Russian systems of sciences and all of that, medicine and stuff like that, So this means that a lot of somebody believed that stuff along with the Nazis and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
They believed it enough to take these guys in and give them work. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look back on history, George Bush, I guess it was George Bush Sr.'s father was convicted of being a traitor, giving out secrets to the Nazis, or money to the Nazis, I mean. And,
yeah, man. I mean, there's a lot of big industries, big corporations that are still running today that were highly, highly responsible in helping the Nazis. I mean, IBM, you can still find punch cards with the IBM logo on it that were used for concentration camps. So a lot of people profited off of what happened during World War II. Only a few of them got to, keep their businesses and keep, just do business as usual after the war is over.
Well, yeah, exactly. All the major Illuminati corporations.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so getting back to the Illuminati now, what is today in pop culture? I mean, you've rubbed shoulders with some of these people, and you've been in some of the back corridors of the entertainment industry. Is there really any control going on today with some of these stars like Jay-Z and Rihanna?
Absolutely. I mean, just being there, and this is not me just watching YouTube videos and saying, oh, yeah, that must be true. This is something I can testify that there is some weird stuff going on in the industry, and it's just clear as day. Without saying any names, I've heard some horrendous stories, just the strangest stories about some of your favorite artists while I was in the industry. And I was talking to people who had been in the industry for years and who would know what they were talking about and had no reason or motive to lie. So I know that there's some weird stuff that goes on in there, and it kind of turned me off from being in the industry myself. Although I still dabble. I still have a lot of friends in the industry. I still, work, but I'm not willing to sell my soul for the industry. And when I say that, I don't mean that in the esoteric sense. I just mean as far as my integrity and my belief system.
Yeah, exactly. And I've heard this story a few times from quite a few people I've known over the years that had started to get into the entertainment industry and turn around and ran. And it wasn't not all of them. There was a few of them that would talk about some weird stuff. I think most of them were just concerned with the integrity part of being forced to do things that they weren't really happy to doing. But back on the Jungle Apocalypse when we were doing that podcast, you told an interesting story, and I think it's kind of gotten lost in the mass amount of information on the internet about Dave Chappelle. And I think while we're talking about Hollywood, let's talk about what happened to Dave Chappelle.
Well, Dave Chappelle came out of nowhere. Me being a comedian, I had always followed Chappelle. Like I knew that kid was going to be a star. But he was just another comedian. In the 90s, we saw a black comedian boom, so he was just another one of those. So when he got his show, he got a deal to get a show based on the success from his film. What was it? How High? Was that his film? No,
Half Baked.
Half Baked, that's it. He got a TV deal, and nobody expected it to do much. It's just another variety show, and it'll just, be part of regular programming. We'll sell some commercials. However, his show went viral, if we could use that word. He was talking about things, uncomfortable social topics dealing with race, and he was making it humorous. Now, what Chappelle didn't know, and what none of us knew at the time, is that those at the top were preparing us, or needed to prepare us, for a black president. Most of us in this country had never heard of Barack Obama. Because trust me, if I heard that name before, I wouldn't forget it.
It was
never
different.
heard of this guy until we found, this guy's running for president. And as we know, Chappelle, not only did he have skits making fun of a black president, he was just making racial issues. He was bringing these difficult racial issues to the mainstream, and people were starting to have these difficult conversations. And so, this dude made more money for the network and for himself than, I believe his DVD was the best selling in history. Am I correct?
Yeah, it still is.
Okay. The number one selling DVD in history. Okay. Now, his excuse when he was on Oprah was that he was filming a skit or something, and he heard a white person laugh, and he discovered that he was being socially irresponsible. So he just quit, and he had a problem with the contracts. No, what happened was he was told that he had to chill out on certain things, and being a creative person, and especially with an ego like we can imagine his must have been at that time.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody's going to tell you shit, so he probably told him to kick rocks, and someone scared him into going to Africa. He didn't just go to Africa just because he's crazy. He went there because somebody scared him. And if it was as simple as a contract dispute, then why not just come back to America and get with another network who would be more than happy to match that contract and more? But that hasn't happened because he's been blackballed. He is not to come back. For whatever reason, whatever happened at that meeting, when he told him to kick rocks or whatever he told him, they made sure that he was not going to be able to come back. Oh, yeah, he could do little stand-up shows here and there, but he's never going to come back on that level that he was. Because if we heard that he had a show right now, everybody's going to be watching that to see if Dave Chappelle still has it. And exactly. You cannot, the dude is still doing comedy. You can't tell me that he just got sick of it after 2 or 3 seasons. He just got sick of it and he doesn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I see pictures of him doing stand-up popping up all over the internet, and they're these small venues, and just out of nowhere he'll pop in and do his shows. So
yeah, I like I said, on the rumor mill, and I heard this from reliable sources within the industry. If we want to get more nuts and bolts about it, he was warned by Oprah. He was warned by Oprah and a few other black luminaries that he was to chill out. That's who the meeting was with. Like, dude, you need to chill out with all of this racial stuff because, and they probably couldn't tell him why at that time, but you just need to chill out. He tells them to kick rocks. They scare him to death. He runs to Africa. He comes back to America. And who does he give his first interview with? Oprah. Okay, and which means her ratings shot through the roof. You know, so we witnessed a gangster move on Oprah's part because she's the one that walked Obama into the White House in the first place. Mm-hmm. You know, so yeah, the Dave Chappelle, and I just saw this too. He has a joke that he does now, and if you get a chance, you could probably find it on YouTube. He has a joke that he puts in this bit where he says, you know, I was when I was doing the Chappelle show, Obama called me. And he does he does Obama's voice. He's like, oh, I'm going to need you to stop doing these black jokes. And, and he's turned it into a skit, but there's a lot of truth in what he's saying.
Interesting. Now, he did an interesting interview on the Actors Studio as well, where he talked about Martin Lawrence. And here we have Martin Lawrence, another star that, kind of went off the deep end and ran out into a street with a gun screaming, "They're trying to kill me."
Yeah.
Is this a common thing in Hollywood? Like, I mean, we had Randy Quaid say the same thing just a couple years ago.
Well, I don't know Martin's story, so I don't want to jump and say, oh, yeah, the Illuminati made him crazy. He might have just went crazy. He might have just blew a fuse. But yeah, you're going to see a lot. I mean, first of all, we do got to consider that when you're a celebrity, that's a very taxing life. You can't leave the house without being noticed. You got a busy schedule of being on the set, interviews, and this, that, and the other. So that can take a toll on you naturally, mentally, physically, all of that. So those things do happen. But you will see an abundance of people in the industry breaking down like that because I think that they sometimes have to do and partake in things that they don't really want to. And excuse me, I don't want to make the charge that, somebody forced them to, sacrifice a goat or something like that. I don't like to, make, when I watch YouTube videos like that, I feel like that messes everything up. It's like, why would you say that without video or without 100% proof?
Exactly.
I'm sure it's happened, but why would you just say that that's what this is,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what happened with Martin. He might have just snapped or, just from the pressure of just the lifestyle or, who knows? I mean, he might be schizophrenic. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I found it interesting that all around that same time we had, Kung Fu guy, David Carradine. Yeah. Now here's a guy that apparently erotic asphyxiated himself in his hotel room. But if you go and you can look up the autopsy or the police crime scene photos online, and you can see clearly that his hands are bound above his head. So, how did that happen, right?
Yeah.
And it came out that he was investigating Chinese secret societies. So, I don't necessarily think that everything that goes on in entertainment is the Illuminati controlling it and, breaking down the society, though I do think some of that is going on. But I think a lot of it, too, is we got to remember that there's a lot of organized crime and whatnot that goes into a lot of the back rooms of entertainment.
Yeah. Well, even organized crime like that's all an Illuminati advent as well, going to the mafia itself, which was put in place. I mean, this is why when you go to Washington, D.C., not only will you see statues of, of all your great forefathers, you'll see the statue of, I'm drawing blanks because I don't have my notes. Is his name Mazio, the guy who started the mafia.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember his name either, but I know who you're talking about. There's a
statue there of this guy, and you're just like, okay, why is he there? Because the mafia was a secret society that was in place for at least 100 years before the cops ever got. I think it was like the 50s or 60s before the FBI was able to crack the mafia. So if there's a secret society that strong of thugs, imagine what kind of secret society you could have with someone who has way more money you know, and way more power. And, you know, so.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, then, I mean, you look at all the connections between the government and the secret, or the underground crimes, you know, families and whatnot. There's lots of connections back and forth.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, drugs has always been a, you know, a major income for those at the top. I mean, just about every major university, every Ivy League university in America was founded with opium money. And that's a known fact, and it's easily researchable. This country was built on opium. And that's a known fact. One just has to look up the opium trades that were going on right around the same time as the founding of this country. This will explain why Abraham Lincoln's wife was a heroin addict, and so many people were. Bayer, the company Bayer, who sells aspirin now, used to sell heroin. Like, you could still find bottles of it. It says heroin for sore throats or whatever. You know. So, yeah, the heroin was a big, drugs period. I mean, September 11th, you just look at that, you know, how the Taliban began to destroy the poppy fields on September 9th. And by September 12th, we were over there guarding those poppy fields.
Yeah, exactly. You know? Exactly. And now heroin production's gone up like, a couple 100%.
Oh, absolutely. Vietnam, like, you know, people just don't know. Vietnam, that's what it was, a big, you know, that was a big home invasion. That's what it was. We're going over there to steal that heroin. And when you watch a film like, what was that movie, American Gangster, about with Denzel, and they made it look like he was so clever that he figured out a way to put the drugs in the coffins. That's bullshit. No street thug would have had those kind of connections to the military to make that happen. That's how the United States government was getting heroin into this country. It wasn't some street thug from New York who, you know, greased a couple of palms. Like, you do not crack the American military with money.
Well, yeah,
with power by being at the top. So.
Exactly. Well, then you look at a testimony like Freeway Ricky Ross. And, and what happened with him in the CIA. And just so everybody's clear, we're not talking about the fat, lazy sort of actor.
Rapper, yeah.
I don't know what to call him anymore. Like, I really don't know. But yeah, he talked a lot about, you know, people that he was buying the drugs from were involved with the CIA, and he had no clue of it.
Oh, yeah. His trail led right to Oliver North and Ronald Reagan, whose wife, coincidentally, had the Say No to Drugs campaign going on right around that same time. You know, and you know, and a lot of people say, well, why would they deal in drugs if they're already so rich? Well, it serves a few purposes. You know, drugs aren't, when we hear drugs, illegal drugs, it's not only for use on the streets. Major pharmaceutical companies need heroin and cocaine, and they need these drugs so they can make the legal drugs that you guys get addicted to. You know, so there's income from that. And, you know, then you got the war on drugs, which is a farce, which feeds the prison industrial complex, which is worth trillions of dollars. You know, so the drugs that they're bringing in, and the reason why they've always used it is because it's something that they can always use. It's like, okay, we make it illegal, so we're the only ones who can sell it. You know, and we'll use you, you know, and until we don't need you no more, then we'll either whack you or we'll just put you in prison and say that you're crazy, and we're going to continue selling these drugs. And that's what it's always been ever since the 1500s. We have been heavily involved in drug trading.
Yeah, I think that's something that kind of goes missed in popular history is the amount of drug trading that has gone on. You know, we all know about the Silk Road and, you know, the spice trade and whatnot, but I think people have forgotten that, you know, that continued on for a long time after that. Oh yeah, absolutely,
absolutely. The opium trade, you know, starting. I mean, if you just really look into the history of the East India Company, was it the East India Shipping Company or whatever?
The East India Trading Company.
Trading Company, that's it.
Yeah.
If you just look into their history, you know, and you know what's really interesting, if you look at their flag, look at their original flag before the founding of America, and then look at the American flag, you will see who really discovered, or who was really behind the economics of the start of America. It's the exact same flag with the red stripes. And I'm going to go into all of that in Jupiter 3, as a matter of fact. But yeah, I mean, the very fact that these guys had their own army and they would just go into India and force those farmers to grow poppies and then take it to China and force the Chinese government to allow their people to consume it, even causing 2 wars. When the government said, hey, we don't want no more opium coming in because it's destroying our economy, they're like, hey, man, you're going to let them, let us sell this stuff here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then these are the guys who came back here and got involved with the slave trade and all of that. And, this is what this country was built on. This is what this country was built on, and what a lot of empires that still stand strong today was built on.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned the slave trade. This is something that we've talked about before, but I think we should kind of get into that too, because it kind of all does relate back to this.
Oh, it absolutely
overarching white supremacist type culture that we live in today, and I say that full well being a white person. So, let's get into that. So, slave trade. How does that tie even in with the Illuminati?
Well, that goes back to the Reconquista. Remember, the Moors, who were Arab and African people, had taken over Europe for roughly around 800 years, while Europe, the historic, were known as the Dark Ages, while that was going on with pestilence and whatnot, the Muslims were living in what they called their golden age. There was an advance in mathematics and sciences and schools and medicine. So they were living it up down there for 800 years. Okay. And of course, there was a lot of mixing going on. And this is why a lot of your Eastern European people have a lot of melanin in their skin. They're very dark. Mm-hmm. A lot of them don't want to admit this, but a lot of them are descended from these very people who had come up from Africa and conquered the area for 800 some odd years. So during the Reconquista, or after the Reconquista, once the Christian front, which was predominantly white, had come down from the north and kicked all of those Moors and those brown people out of there and pushed them back down into Africa. That's when they had to hurry up and go Christianize America before the Muslims or the Jews did it. And so, after they get everything settled, they got the New World. They're like, you know what? How about we go get revenge on those people who conquered us for 800 years? Let's put them in ships and make them go over there and build that shit up for us. And that's just the truth. And in any conventional history book, if you just read it, will tell you that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's basically, and I'm not saying that now. Don't get it twisted. Don't think I'm saying that what happened to my people was justified.
Oh yeah, no.
But I'm just saying that this is why there was so much animosity and hate for those people. If you look at a lot of the original pictures of the devil, the Christian depictions of the devil, you would notice that he's very dark complected and has a long beard, and he looks like a Moorish person. He looks like an Arab or a black person. And the reason for this was, and here's another thing that you can check out. If you look at the earliest pictures from the catacombs under Rome of Jesus, you will see that he was darker complected, of either of Arab or African, sub-Saharan African descent. And those pictures are still in existence, and you can find them. They are the oldest pictures of the Christ. However, how can these these Franks and these Visigoths, how can they tell their kids that these Moorish people are the enemy when their Messiah looks just like them? And of course I'm going to get into this in Jupiter 3, where Da Vinci is hired to make new depictions of Jesus and give the people a new thing to focus on. And this was the pictures that they were going to take to the New World to show to the Indians, so they would know that they were that they were subhuman as well, and they were to bow down to this blonde-haired, blue-eyed person. So yeah, it really gets deep. That's basically how the slave trade ties in, and indoctrination of Christianity and white supremacy. That's how it all ties in.
Yeah, and I mean, we look at all of it down through history, and with that in mind, and you can see the push to to keep the black man down isn't just a a nifty saying. It was an actual truth. And everybody seems to know it. That's the thing that always gets me about it, is everybody knows that if you're black and you have to deal with a cop, you might be harassed.
Well, yeah. Well, I think, I don't think that is a direct result of the history I just talked about. I think that's just an American thing now. Now this is just animosity between Americans. This is a fear, and I really think there's a fear of each group discovering that they're not better than the other group.
Yeah.
Because if you talk to a pro-black activist, he will start talking about ancient Egypt, and he'll start talking about the original Israelites and how black man built this and built that and did all these great things, and how the white man was a caveman and this and that and the other. If you talk to a pro-white nationalist, they will tell you how the white man civilized the world and how blacks were savages. It's the same thing. And I think both of these groups fear that if they took an honest look at each other and really understood each other's history, they will see that neither one is better than the other. All we have to do is look at American athletics. For the longest time, it has been, it's been said that, the black athlete is just a better athlete. And this has proven to be true. After all, you're talking about a people who are descended from the strongest of a group of people who were put in the gym for 400 years. But a lot of the white kids did not have, there weren't programs for them when they were growing up to develop their sports skills, because everything was, going to the black kids. Okay, we have programs for them because their people have been subdued for so long, and these poor white kids started being neglected. But now they have groups that include all of them. So now a lot of these white kids are starting to show that they are also just as equally as athletic. They can run just as fast and jump just as high. And there's a lot of black people who will be afraid of that. There's a lot of white people who will be afraid to know that there's black people who can invent and do a lot of the same things and match and even better some of the stuff that they created. So I really think that what we're seeing in America today, as far as racism, is a fear of each other, a fear of discovering that we're not better than the other.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It does. I mean, even in Canada, we're such a multicultural society, but yet the racism is still a big problem here from all sides. I mean, it's not nearly as in your face as it is in the U.S., but it's still here.
Yeah.
But, okay, well, coming up with Jupiter 3, what are we looking at a long time frame here? Or?
I don't want to half-ass that one. Each Jupiter part I put out, there's an extreme amount of pressure put on me because I have to outdo myself. I have to be just as good as the last. Luckily, when I did part 2, I was a little apprehensive because I didn't feel like part 2 was complete. And this is why I erroneously promised that I was going to have the next part weeks later. I had a feeling that people weren't going to feel like it was complete because it wasn't complete. There's still a lot more, but people were happy with it. So I said, okay, cool. You guys are happy with that. Good. Now I have to outdo that with the third installation. So and then plus, this one, as you can imagine, is going to be harder because I am going to have to get into the white supremacy. I'm going to have to get into the Moors and how they, what they did, with Europe for 800 years. And that's a history that the average American, adult or child, just doesn't know. They don't talk about that. They'll say, yeah, the Moors came in and conquered and then we kicked them out. But they won't tell you about the 800 years that they were there and how that affected everything. That just affected the people in a positive way, so both Islam and Christianity have both made positive, and they've both done a lot of damage to that, to that region of the world and to mankind, but yeah, so with Jupiter 3, I'm going to get into that. I'm going to get into more modern. It's called Guns, Goons, and Stars. So we're going to be talking about the heroin trade. We're also going to be talking about the celebrity, a lot of the modern day celebrities and how celebrities are used to, push this agenda forward and why, because it just doesn't make sense. A lot of people will say, oh, it's stupid. Why would they invite a rapper into the Illuminati, or why would they invite this person into the Illuminati? And I'm going to break that down and explain it.
Okay, perfect. Well, before we go then, why don't you drop us just one quick story from something that you're probably going to talk about in that? You got one off the top of your head? I know we were talking at one time. You told me this real interesting overview of it was actually quite detailed. We talked for probably an hour and some about Charles Manson. Can you give us a quick overview of that?
Oh, man, that goes so deep. Like that story, and I don't even know if I'm going to be able to do that in part 3. That might be a Jupiter 4. But yeah, when you look into the Manson murders, and you look at the ties that go to the Satanic Church, which lead to the Zodiac killings, which happened in San Francisco, where the Church of Satan was founded, and the zebra killings a few years before that. And then you look at the Son of Sam killings, which happened in New York. All of these things tie in, and there's people who tie into all, and a lot of these are famous people. We're talking Sinatra, we're talking Sammy Davis Jr., we're talking Debbie Reynolds, the Beach Boys, like a bunch of these celebrities. They all tied into this weird thing. And Roman Polanski, his wife, Sharon Tate, who we know was murdered by the Manson family. Like, there are all these strange connections. And I put them all together. And I don't want to get too much into it now. For one, I can't remember all the connections, and I don't want to leave anything out. But I make a pretty compelling argument of connecting these things, and without, just using a bunch of made up connections. These are easily researchable connections that you can find. And you'll see how all of this ties in, even up to this very day.
Interesting. I'm sure people are really going to like it. So you can, for everybody listening, you can pick up Jupiter Volume 1 and 2 at the Conspiracy Outlet, conspiracyoutlet.com. You go up now, and until the 20th, we actually have it on sale for $10. You get both episodes and the free or bonus ebook. And you can check that out. So, Mr. Gates, thank you very much for joining me again, my friend.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, man.
All right, folks. Well, just hold on, Mr. Gates. I'll get back to you in a second.
Okay.
All right, folks. So that's another episode for tonight. Actually, if everybody that's watching live wants to hang around, I'm going to play a film and jump in the chat room. So if you want to ask me any questions or anything, you can do that. We got a film on I Pet Goat. It's about 50 minutes long, and it breaks down I Pet Goat and the relation to the Antichrist theory. Really interesting film. Can't validate any of it, but, it was a cool one, so I thought I'd play it while I hung out in the chat room. And so come back next week, Saturday at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and David Wendell from Bushcraft on Fire is going to be here, and we're going to be talking about survival and bushcraft preparedness, because, with the crazy amount of earth changes and abnormal weather events going on in the world, we all should probably be a lot more prepared. So that's going to be a great show. And then we have some really interesting guests coming up. Oh, one last thing before I forget, and it's probably the biggest announcement I've had to make in 2 years, and I'm almost forgot it. Starting April 6th at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be on Unbound Radio, the Intel Hub's new radio station. They're going to launch that April 1st at unboundradio.com, and you'll be able to tune in and check out the new Conspiracy HQ radio program. So everybody watching live, I'm going to be simulcasting both of them, so you'll be able to watch the video while I do the show, and then after the show's over, I'm going to take another hour, and that's when we're going to sit down and do the internet TV show. So check that out, April 6th at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Anyway, I'm just going to play a music video for a quick minute while I load up the other video, and I'll meet you guys in the chat room. Thanks a lot for joining me.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this first installation in a series about the Illuminati.
This is so fun. Where to start? When I first moved to the north in 1998, I was was greeted by a blast of -40 winter in early December.